piece of paper that has a list of your vocabulary words, that's a really good idea. So I'm going to start and make my list up here. Measuring vocab. This would be just like when we are in our book and we write down notes in our interactive journal, same thing, but you can just do it on a piece of paper and use it with you. So our first one we had was units, and we know that's what you're counting. And I'm going to go ahead and make a T-chart because we're going to be adding on this for the next probably 15 lessons. So we have U.S. customary, and we have the metric system. And we said that the metric system is used all over the world, specifically all doctors, mathematicians, scientists use it. The U.S. customary is only used in the United States. I heard an interesting thing on TED Ed when I was watching the other day that one of the reasons why we have the U.S. customary is when they were developing the system, a person who was coming from Europe with metric tools, their boat got attacked by pirates and all their tools got confiscated, and they never made it to the United States. And because the tools never got here, they didn't have those tools. So every colony in the United States used all different forms. They used their foot or their arm, or and that's how we got the name foot, because it was actually how big a person's foot was. So there's some really cool stuff. So if you haven't already gone on YouTube, or BrainPop is free now, you can go and create an account on BrainPop. There's some really cool videos. I'll try to post a few for you guys. And then that one was on TED Ed, I believe, which is also free. And you can just type in TED Ed and type in the topic U.S. customary metric, and it'll come up. So we are working right now on length, and we're also going to be measuring in weight and volume, but right now we're focusing on length. And our units start with an inch, then they go to a foot, then they go to a yard, and then they go to a mile. And we're metric, I didn't study it at home, we'll work on metric. What's really good about the metric system is that once you know how to convert one, like length, it's the exact same procedure for weight and the exact same one for volume. So, but it's a little bit harder of a system. Because we've used the system so much in our daily lives, a lot of us just know it. Now, there are certain ones you're going to need to know, and I'm going to be highlighting the conversions that they won't give you. This is 4th grade, so you'll probably recognize all this, but they are going to give you the harder ones. So they're going to give you things like miles, how to convert foot to miles. On the test, there's going to be a really cool little formula sheet you can click on, and it'll give you those. But they're going to expect you to know inches, feet, and yards. And of course, plural, feet, it is an irregular verb. All right, so a few other words that we had yesterday. We have precise, which just means accurate. We have the word approximation, which just means that it is like an estimate. It's a really good guess. We have that you had to understand that a half or halves mean you're rounding it to a denominator with 2. That can also be a whole number, like 1, or a mixed number, like 1.5. Then they had fourths, or quarters, and that was rounding it to a fourth, a half, 3/4, or a whole, or a mixed number. And then our last one was the tools. So the standard actually asks that you understand, if you're given a situation, you know what you're measuring, that you're measuring length or volume or width, that you know what tool to use, and that you know what unit to use. So it's all 3 things. You have to be able to understand what you're measuring, what tool, and what unit. So I'm going to make another little column over here. I should have thought to do this, but I didn't. And so our tool is going to be a ruler or a tape measure. And remember, rulers are for flat objects. You have to measure on a flat surface. So if you're trying to measure with a book underneath your paper, that won't work. And then a tape measure is for bumpy surfaces or for three-dimensional shapes. All right, so we are on length, and we're going to move into our lesson 2. So we are on page 807, lesson 2. For many of the throw rides at an amusement park, riders must be at least 48 inches tall, and Chang is 4 feet tall. Is he tall enough to ride the thrill ride at the amusement park? We're going to convert. Ooh, did we put that on their list? Nope. Convert, which remember just means change. This is very similar to making an equivalent fraction. It's the same, it's just written differently. All right, here we go. There are 4 feet in every inch. So if I have convert 4 feet to inches. Sorry, I need more coffee. 1 foot is 12 inches, and we have 4 feet. So we have 4 groups of 12. And whenever we say something like groups of, we know that means multiply, because it's like saying 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12. 4 groups of 12. All right, so you're going to set it up like you would any other multiplication problem. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 1 is 4. So we were converting from feet to inches. So my new unit is inches, and it is 48 inches. If he is 48 and needs to be 48 and he's 4 feet, is he big enough to ride? 4 feet equals 48 inches, and so the answer is yes. And remember, these are comparisons. Comparisons are greater than, less than, or equal to, and we also know that in algebra, so the 6th grade standard, we have greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. But we're not focusing on those right now because we're just focused on 5th grade. Check using your division. Is always good to check your answer. We know that 48 divided by 4 is 12. So the units of length that are most often used in the United States are the inch, foot, yard, and mile. We already have talked about that multiple times. We call this the U.S. customary system. And these are the measurements you need to know. All right, so here's your key concept. These are the ones you have to know, and these are the ones they'll give you. You need to know 1 foot is made of 12 inches. And you know this because you think of a ruler. A ruler has 12 inches, and a ruler is a foot. Okay, now I want everyone to raise their arms. So hold your arms out from side to side, all the way out, like fingertip to fingertip. And that's a yard. So 1 yard, and there's something called yardsticks that you might have seen at a grocery store. 1 yard is 3 feet. All right, if you can memorize, you're going to have to memorize these. They will not give you those. But if you know 1 yard is 3 feet, you can turn it into inches, because we know 3 groups of 12 is 36. Now this one, right here, this one will be on your formula chart. They're not going to ask you to know that one by memory. If they ask you a question where you have to convert how many feet are in a mile or how many yards are in a mile, they're going to give it to you. But these two, they will not. They'll ask you to solve a problem just like the one you just did at the top, and then you're going to be expected to do that one by knowing your own formula. When you convert measurements, you change from one unit to another. I think we already talked about that from the beginning. All right, now this is all the years of teaching this. This is how I've helped my kiddos learn this. Think in your head. So just think, if you're going from a big unit down to a smaller unit. So if I was going from, say, 1 foot is how many inches? 12. okay? So if I went from a big to a smaller, what happened to my number? I went from 1 to 12. What happened to my number? Did my number get bigger or smaller? My number actually got bigger because you need more of these small ones to fill in the space of this one big one. So even though your number is staying, these are equivalent, the number gets bigger. This will be just like if you're going from a whole number to tenths, because the tenths are smaller. So when you go from a big unit to a small unit, you're going to multiply because it takes more of them. And sure enough, if you go from a small unit to a big unit, like 3 feet equals 1 yard. My number gets smaller because it needs fewer numbers, fewer of those little measurements to make up that big measurement. And, you know, this is like the underlying concept of this whole thing. That if you're going from a big unit to a small unit, you multiply because you need more. If you're going from a small unit to a big unit, you divide because you need less. And so one thing, until you get really comfortable with this, I would just write this at the top, just like we do our magic numbers. I would write this at the top. So I'm going to flip